Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, and this episode is a special one in conjunction with Scriber News. I've gathered strangers, friends, and even family to have and model a discussion on the very polarized topic of our President Donald Trump. A couple of nuts and bolts here. If you have something to say, please, just for organizational purposes. I don't know if this will be necessary the whole time, but please click the little hand button. If you go to participants, raise hand, or if that's not working, just type hand into the chat, and then I'll call on you just in case, so we're not talking over each other. That might not be necessary, but let's try that to get started. So part of my goal with this is to have discourse and talk about these things, because unfortunately the way that the media is set up right now is we are all in our own echo chambers, and there's a lack of understanding for why people think what they think. So when you want to respond to someone else in the group, I just ask that you show understanding before responding. If you're responding to a point that they made, please clarify that that is indeed the point that they were trying to make, so you're not responding to something that they didn't intend. So to start off with kind of what my goal is for having this is two quick quotes. One is Abraham Lincoln. He said, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better." Love that. Another one is the English philosopher John Stuart Mill, who said, "He who knows only his side of the case knows little of that. If he is equally unable to refute the reasons on the opposite side, if he does not so much as know what they are, he has no ground for preferring either opinion." So in that vein, that is what I am aiming for, is a deeper understanding, and hopefully we can put this out onto the interwebs and help others to have conversations similar and help to understand why people think what they think. So just to get started, some people might be joining us throughout the conversation, but just to get started, thank you all for being here. Some of you I don't know at all. Some of you I know very well, including my father is here. And I want to start just by doing a quick 10-second introduction. Just tell me really quickly, tell the audience who you are and just something very briefly about yourself. Something like, I'm Will Roosh. I'm a 38-year-old high school teacher in Los Angeles. So we can just go and we'll start with, here, Dad, you can go.
Hi, I am, as previously mentioned, Bill's father. I am retired after 47 years of working in management and business and management development, and glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
Am I unmuted? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Skylar? Yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Skylar. I'm 22 years old. I'm a recent Republican, and I've only just became Republican, quote unquote, ever since I moved to Vietnam around a year and a half ago, which is a communist country. Before that, I was very much a Hillary and Bernie supporter. And the irony is, in moving to a communist country is how I become even more of a capitalist, and eventually a Trump supporter, or the supporter of our presidents. Yeah.
Thank you. Mika?
Yeah, so I'm Micah, whichever one's easier for you to say. I'm 21 years old, and I study international relations and political science at Hebrew University in Jerusalem.
Yeah. Thank you. Kyle?
What's up? My name is Kyle Robert Carter. I am a performer, like singer, actor, dancer, activist type person. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and pre-COVID-19, I was on tour as a Mufasa understudy on The Lion King. So.
And Raphael?
Hi, everyone. How's it going? My name is Rafael Struve, 28 years old. I am a Venezuelan American based in Houston, Texas, host of the State of Venezuela podcast. Very similar story to Skylar's, actually, because of the ideology that governs both our countries, but I'll get into that when it's my turn to explain so.
Cool. So just getting started, and then, as I said, people might be filtering in as we go on. To start off with Donald Trump, what would you say is the best thing about the Trump administration and the worst thing about the Trump administration? So, like the best and worst thing of the Trump administration. So feel free, anyone can jump in and start it off. If you have a hand, just put up your hand, and then I'll call on you, and we can move forward with what your thoughts are. And I think this kind of coincides a little bit with the John Stuart Mill. Yes, Skylar?
I like to say it's about the optics, and for some reason, I didn't understand why is it that around the world, people that's not American, that's not very deep inside American politics, likes President Trump a lot more than they did President Obama. And that's one of the things that really gets that's one of the first things that really gets me to thinking. It's like, okay, why is it that when I move to a communist country, everybody is like very much pro-Trump? If you ask them deeply about it, they won't be able to tell you like what's the difference between the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, but they'll say that they like Trump better because of his personality, which in America we don't like. And what I don't like about him as an American is that it's also his personality. And I think it's one of those things where optics and medias really plays a role in what makes something good or worse or bad, depending on where we look at it or how we look at it.
The same thing that's the positive that you've seen is also the negative for you personally.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah, Kyle.
I think the worst part of his presidency that really irks me is the level with which not just him, not just what he says, but pretty much anyone who comes in contact with him that has a desire to participate, and then upon participating and realizing that it's very difficult to participate with a new set of political rules that people aren't accustomed to, that they then leave and essentially say that he deals with issues in just this moment, right? He receives policy information, he receives data, he receives guidance, and that his decision making is based on right now. That includes the way he interacts with the media, right? Oftentimes he'll say something on Tuesday, and then a month of Tuesdays later, he'll say the complete opposite of what he said on that Tuesday, mostly because he's dealing with things as they happen, as opposed to what we're accustomed to, which is people utilizing foresight and utilizing the data to try and predict what's going to happen so that they can predict what they're going to need to say a month from now. And because he doesn't do that, even though me personally, I don't like, in the same way that Skylar said, I don't like his personality. The thing that really irks me is it's difficult for anyone to know what's true and not true because of the way he deals with things now, as opposed to having what seems to be some kind of long-term, even for lack of a better term, in a business world, he doesn't seem to have a marketing plan. So the marketing is one thing on one day and completely different on the other day. So nobody really has any idea. And to add to that, the issue that really irks me with that is, as a person who grew up with a father who is a drug treatment counselor, in that world, these are tactics that are used to gaslight people who are abused by abusers. So because these are the tactics that are used by abusers to abuse people in domestic violence situations, it's hard for me to separate that is not what he's doing, because it is what people do. It's what con men do. It's what it's what abusive husbands do. It's what salespeople do, depending on what kind of sales tactic you're using, right? And in some sales, that's a good thing, right? In order to make the sale, you need to utilize that tactic to get that sale. So anyway, all of that to say, I think I don't like specifically the tactics that are used with the way he interacts with the media and the way he interacts with other people in the administration, because it's very hard to tell for anybody, let alone, you know, someone who's got a master's degree in something and somebody who just graduated from, you know, 8th grade, right? That it's very difficult to know what is true and untrue. So then on the flip thing, something that I think is very good about Donald Trump, and depending on who you are, depends on whether or not you'll consider this a positive or a negative, but the galvanization, no matter what side you're on, right? Growing up as a millennial, we were taught essentially to be passive, at least where I grew up. I shouldn't say that for all millennials, right? Where I grew up, we were taught to be passive with American politics, because we were taught that people older than you could trust them, and that as you grew up, you would learn politics and you would start to understand why people made the choices that they made. So you didn't have to be as active as you wanted to. Now, I went to a public school that was primarily Black and Latino, and upon learning more about that, oftentimes that again is a tactic to keep people from activating in their local communities, because if you don't activate as an 18 to 25-year-old in your local community, you're less likely to vote for district attorney, you're less likely to vote for sheriff, you're less likely to vote for comptroller, less likely to vote for city commissioners, like all those kind of things. But all of that to say, no matter what you feel about Donald Trump, you are seeing people activated in the political process, at least from my perspective. People that I've known my entire life have not been activated in this process are madly activated in this process, and they want to be a part of it. And they're sharing with anybody they know, from the reddest of the red to the bluest of the blue and everywhere in between. People are really activated right now. And for some people, they're choosing, I don't want to participate, whatever. They're just very activated. And I think that's a good thing.
Sure. Well, I'm a civics teacher, so as a civics teacher, I see that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, Mika?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with the good and then go to the bad. I think when it comes to the good, I would say Trump has a way of reimagining, especially when it comes to foreign policy, he has this knack of like reimagining the approach to things. Like one of the first things he tackled was the whole NATO situation, which was based on like the Cold War system. So the European countries, which are now far more able to contribute, weren't really contributing their fair share. And just like the way that he said it was wrong, but his point was right. And even like he called out, there was a small moment, I think, at the beginning of his presidency or something around there, 2018 maybe, where he called out, he called out Germany for like building an oil pipeline with Russia, and just being like, why, if you're an American, like, what are you doing? Like, we're supposed to protect, this whole system was set up to protect you from Russia. So like, there's this I do like that he's like willing to look at things and reimagine them. Having said that, I think the biggest negative with Trump is there's almost like this non-desire to like unify the country. And even my dad, who's like a major Trump supporter, says like, no, like Trump, that's the thing my dad even admits, like Trump does not have a desire to unify the country. And you could like blame the media, and I think Trump would say that like he would blame the media in that, but I don't think his rhetoric, even on like inauguration day, was not, okay, like let's get all Americans together, like, okay, let's put things aside, like this was a tough election, like, you know, day one it was like how many people were at my inauguration, and just like picking a fight with the media day one, and like starting off this whole presidency, which is really deeply divided Americans. And I think the biggest way you see it is I see myself more in the middle. I voted for Biden. I actually just sent in my vote yesterday. I voted for Biden, but there's this like because of Trump, there's like these two camps. There's no recognition of the people in the middle. There's no recognition of the people who are not pro Donald Trump, but they wouldn't necessarily consider themselves like that. I don't align myself with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for instance, but then somebody on the right has said to me like, "Oh, you believe in X, Y, and Z. You believe in da 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 da," and I'm like, I don't believe in those things.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big issue with Trump is he's really divided the country into these polar opposites.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So I think we're letting in another person into the conversation.
So can I
Let me
add
know.
on to what Mecca and Kyle said earlier regarding Trump personality and his divisiveness, but at the same time, okay, so what Kyle said something about how it's abusive in the way that he connects with the people, but I think that's also a very cultural point of view because here in Vietnam, how they've been talking to Donald Trump regarding how he's been dealing with China, which is quote unquote, this is kind of racist to say, but I'm Asian, so I can say it, but like no one likes China in Asia. Like we just don't. Chinese, yes, like Chinese is different than China, but China as this symbolism of things that people just don't like the Xi Jinping administration. So one of the things I've been saying about Trump is that only pig can wrestle with pigs. And that's one of the things why a lot of people like, especially in a culture where we're more frank, where we're less likely to have, be gentle with each other regarding how we say things, where teachers still have corporal punishment for kids, where it's encouraged to have corporal punishment for kids. And it's not viewed as being abusive. It's absolutely normal. Like it's the thing where you talk with your friend over coffee, like 20 years later, talk about how much of a brat you were and how much of an ass whooping you got. So when people in America says that, oh, Trump had this abrasive personality, his personality is very much perfect for the rest of the world, especially in East Asia, where people like that kind of frank politician and they dislike that of a proper speaking one, like say Obama. They think Obama as being a very, it's like there's a front to it. That's why like only politicians talk nicely, only politicians say good words that make it sound nice, but they don't actually do anything. While Trump, they're like, okay, so he's not the most eloquent man, he's not the most well-spoken, but he get it done. China is scared of him. North Korea, he actually established a historical connection with North Korea. And regarding what Mark has said about how he's divisive, how he doesn't want to unify people, and that he talks about numbers, that's very business-minded of him as a businessman. Because when you're a CEO of a company, you want to go where the majority shareholder is. You want to talk numbers. You want to say like, oh, this is what I'm seeing on numbers. They don't exactly care about how the people in the company feel, because in any company, you're going to have sides that's like, oh, less HR, less this. But if you're at the top and you're the CEO, you want something that's like, okay, what does the majority of people want? And Trump base, I think to him, he sees that as his primary shareholders. Therefore, he's gonna care about the number that's best for them. He's gonna care about what they want, and he doesn't necessarily care about the other company, meaning the Democratic Party.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Scholar. So we have Demi Monroe just joined us. Demi, can you just introduce yourself to everybody and just say, what's your name, and just 10 seconds, a little bit about you, and then we'll just get in. Right now, we're just talking about the best and worst thing of the Trump administration is like an introduction to some of the questions. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, sorry guys that I was late. But yeah, my name is Demi. I'm an artist, musician, singer, / rapper / songwriter. And I'm also a Forex trader. So just to simplify it, I'm living a stressful life, especially around this coronavirus stuff. But we're going to make it out because we're going to have discussions like what we're doing today. And I'm excited to be here. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I'm from Austin, Texas. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Can y'all hear me good?
Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah. We hear you. We hear you well. William, Raphael, or Demi, do you want to go into this, or we can go to the next question? It doesn't. Yeah, Raphael. Yeah. Yeah, just the best and worst thing about the Trump administration. There's a bunch of questions we want to try and get to. I appreciate all of the nuance, so I don't want to like cut anyone off, but we just all want to make sure we get to as much as we can as well and keep it flowing. Appreciate all of you.
Sure. Okay. So I'll try to make this as quick as possible, but I think this my answer, in order to give it properly, would require a bit of a just looking back at how I ended up arriving at this decision to want to vote for a second term for President Trump, because before I didn't even vote. And I, going back to 2016, there are two moments in my mind that really, I guess, made me, one, adamantly opposed to him, and then one, really second guess why I thought like that in the first place. Number one, shout out to the other person in the group from Texas. I'm from Houston. We have a concert here we used to called Free Press Summerfest. And growing up in Houston, I've always been a major rap fan, huge hip hop head. And there was a set performed by Mac Miller at Free Press Summerfest where he sang he performed this song Donald Trump, and he did it in protest of the Trump candidacy and had the crowd yelling, putting their middle finger up in the air, saying "F Donald Trump, F Donald Trump," and I went in gleefully joining in that crowd. So at that point, I was very adamantly opposed to Trump the candidate. Why was I opposed to Trump the candidate? I was opposed to Trump the candidate because I believed everything that the media was telling me about the man, telling me that he was racist against Hispanics, telling me that he didn't like Mexicans, he didn't like minorities, this and that, and I bought it. I ate it all up, and I didn't second guess it. And it wasn't really until I was challenged that I understood that maybe I had to second guess when I was looking at, for example, what was going on in CNN. I'll never forget this point. I'll try and be as quick as possible with this. There was a day where I was watching a segment on CNN where in the Chiron, basically like the little scrolling feed for CNN, they were talking about how Assad, who is the disputed president of Syria, had just unleashed a sarin gas attack on his citizens. And you would think that that would be the main story of CNN, right? Instead, what the main story was, it was how Donald Trump eats fried chicken on his private plane using a fork and knife. They brought in a senior political analyst to demonstrate how he uses a fork and knife to eat fried chicken on his private plane, and then had a panel of experts dissect the means by which he was eating the fried chicken. And I realized, wait a second, something doesn't seem right here. The priorities seem very, very messed up. So my point with all of this is, when I was pointing this out to friends, and instead of me pointing out that he was being misrepresented, I was being attacked for seemingly defending him. So already, not even before he was president, I was being ostracized. And worse so because I'm Hispanic. So they said, "Oh, you're Hispanic. How could you be defending him?" And I said, "Wait a second, I'm not defending the guy. You guys are just misrepresenting him." So over time, I started to do my homework, like many others, and realized that the man's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But one of the greatest things about him, perhaps the greatest thing, is that this presidency for me has become somewhat of a Rorschach test, where essentially you see this presidency and it's a reflection of the biases that one has pre-existing prior to the existence of Trump. Because a lot of people have this understanding that Trump is sort of like the cause for a lot of the problems that predate his presidency. But neuroscience shows that when political beliefs are challenged, a person's brain becomes active in the areas that govern personal identity and emotional responses to threats. So a lot of people see the Trump presidency as more of a threat than it should be. And I think the media picked up on that and exacerbated those fears. So having people push back and think for themselves, I think, is one of the greatest things that has come out of this administration. People who are minorities who can say, look, you guys aren't going to round us up and harvest our votes anymore because we can think for ourselves. We're perfectly willing and able to do that. Now, that being said, I want to go back to a point that Kyle had made that I actually do agree with. Probably the worst thing about this presidency is, unfortunately, it is a bit of a Pandora's box where there are certain things that come out of his mouth, whether they be from Twitter or maybe they be in a press conference where you say, oh, I wish you hadn't said that. That being said, I can turn off a tweet, but I can't turn off a bad policy. And so that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I think there's there's TDS, it's Trump derangement syndrome, but there is also a Trump devotion syndrome. So, and it goes also with what Kyle was saying about it galvanized. People are very solid very few people are indifferent about Donald Trump.
Right.
And that's something that I think that we have to recognize. Yeah. Dad, yeah.
So I'll be real quick. What I don't like about Donald Trump is his utter disrespect for political norms, his disrespect for the office that he holds, the fact that he has told an unbelievable amount of lies. And my quick answer to what I thought was the best thing about the Trump administration was that hopefully it will be gone in 6 days. But I have to agree with Kyle that I haven't seen. I'm old, probably as old as all of you put together, or almost. But I was around in the late 60s, early 70s, and that was a time of galvanization for a bunch of young people to speak up and change the world. And I think it started with the mass shooting down in Florida and those high school kids, but I've seen it just expand. I've never seen this level of, on both sides, of people wanting to be heard. And so I would agree that what he's brought to the table is he's got people who would have sat on their couches. I waited 4.5 hours yesterday in line to vote. I can't imagine that I would have ever done that if it had been somebody that I wasn't either opposed to or for. So I would agree with Kyle that I think he's really activated a lot of people, got them up off couches.
Yeah. So just to try and now, like, that was like the introduction, and now, so I'm going to hand it over if Demi, if you want to respond to that, just getting some more interaction now. I have questions here to kind of guide it, but I want to try and facilitate as much of a conversation between you. You've kind of heard the positives and negatives that everyone kind of sees. Demi, I'd like to ask you to go next, and then just respond. You kind of feel a little bit for each of your personalities where you kind of stand, your positives and negatives, and then try and get some interaction addressing the issues that y'all have, like that Texas people. Yeah. Hold on one second, Demi. Can you unmute you?
All right, there we go. I never know if I'm supposed to look at the screen or the camera. Either way it goes. What I would say is, though, I'm from Austin. That's a liberal city, right? So I pretty much lived my life around nothing but liberals. So I always had the perspective that Trump was the bad guy and he was racist. I never knew why or how he was racist. I would get these little clips shown to me and I'd be so like, damn, he's fucking racist, right? And I wouldn't even listen to the whole thing. But it started, what made me want to dig deep into politics was the fact that I realized how politics play a huge role in the music industry, right? So here I am, a young female artist trying to make it in Austin with this perspective that I feel that everyone should matter, or that everyone, you know what I mean, that we should all be able to come to a place where we can all come together. Well, with liberals, it doesn't work like that. To me, I feel that there's hidden agendas, and to find out going down the rabbit hole and realizing all the things that Trump is doing for us to help us, bring us together, he has my vote 100%. You know what I mean? Because I can't say that any of these presidents that was in office did anything for us. When we had H1N1, where was Obama when the stimulus could have been brought about then? Why didn't we have any sort of assistance to make us feel appreciated or that they cared for us? So for me to see Trump do all what he did during the pandemic, on top of the other things that I know that he's fighting for us, he's done so much, which I don't understand why people don't get that, because I look at like policies, and he's done more for the Black community than Obama ever did. Obama sold us out to China right along the rest of them, and I have nothing else to say about that, you know.
So I think this is one of those, another situation. I don't know who it was that said it was like it's like a Rorschach test. Yeah, that was Raphael. Yeah. I think that's something that's happening right now. Is, you know, Demi, thank you for sharing that. Is, I think that when you say, you know, this is what I'm seeing in Donald Trump, there's other people in this conversation that are like, I'm not seeing that at all. And I think this is a great opportunity to maybe facilitate some better understanding about, you know, maybe get some more clarity to try and understand a little bit about what's going on here. Anyone? Yeah, Kyle.
Yeah, let's not get it twisted. Let's end this. You know, this, what this conversation is about to be. Let's end this right now. Democrat and Republican, doesn't matter. You can be crooked either way. Every party in the history of mankind, it doesn't matter what party you represent. It doesn't matter what ideology you are. If you're corrupt and you're crooked, you're corrupt and you're crooked. It doesn't matter. And the fact, what Demi said, fact of the matter is, the illegitimacies and the corruptions have been abound in the United States of America since the colonists touched down on American soil. The differences between the Quakers and the Calvinists, the differences between the people who landed at Plymouth and what they did to the Native Americans there versus the people who landed in Jamestown and the things they did there. So if we're talking about who's offering corruption and who's offering lies and deception, man, that is abound and it exists. So I want to acknowledge that as well, so that we don't continue this conversation at any point in time and start to believe that if any of us are a Democrat or if any of us are a Republican, that one of those things is more corrupt than the other. They share, in the history of America, they share that burden equally. For every crime bill from 1994 that was started by a Democrat, there is a crime bill in the past when the parties were flip-flopped that came from the other side that created a demonization of somebody, right? We forget about the demonization of workers in the early 1900s in factory work, right? And how that dynamic was playing against each other, and, you know, free blacks coming up fighting against the Irish who had been, you know, upset because when they got here they were so just, I want to say that just to start, like, we can definitely acknowledge that corruption exists on all sides. And, you know, for me, as one, I'm biracial, and two, I am an independent who in this individual case is voting Democratic. But there's a reason I am that way, because I acknowledge when I read history that the innocent, if we looking for who's the most innocent, woo, that is a tough conversation to have. So just acknowledge that.
Yeah, so that gets me to actually the next kind of place I wanted to go anyway, which is Donald Trump is the first president with no political background whatsoever. He's a true outsider. And what are your thoughts on the positives and negatives of having this true outsider? Because I believe that a big reason why he won was exactly where I think many of us are aligned, which is the establishment has not served a lot of people. And that could be, you know, the black kid in Brooklyn, or it could be the white kid in Alabama. You know, there are people who felt like they were being ignored by our government, and this wasn't a government serving the elites. And Donald Trump, despite the fact that his background is from he voiced that I am a populist. So, you know, I talked to someone from like West Virginia, and he said, you know what, I know that this guy was a Yankee, I know that he was a rich kid and all that kind of stuff, but damn it, you know what, like, he represented me. He said that I wasn't a bad guy just because I'm a white guy, just because I'm blue collar and stuff like that. He didn't say that I was overly privileged or anything. So you know what, I'm giving this crazy guy my vote. So what are the positives and negatives of having this outsider when it is true that our system has not served so many people? Yeah, Raphael?
So I think I can speak to this from a comparative standpoint. Being from Venezuela, I understand the history of having an outsider and the consequences that comes with it, both good and bad. So most people, when they know about Venezuela, they know that there's a political situation going on there. There's a crisis that's been exacerbated by endemic corruption, by a dictatorship, and by an outsider movement that was spurred by Hugo Chavez. There's some Venezuelans. Most Venezuelans are in favor of the Trump presidency because he's called out so much of what's going on in Venezuela. But you do have some that they see certain parallels between Trump and Hugo Chavez as being outsiders who ended up converting themselves eventually into authoritarian figures. I don't know if I necessarily agree or align with that particular line of thinking, but I mean, I can understand where they're coming from. That being said, I think that there are positives and there are negatives, like you mentioned, of being an outsider. When it comes to the Trump base, I think a lot of people, especially on the left, don't understand that this Trump base transcends both left and right. There have been individuals who have walked away from both parties in the hundreds of thousands that are voting for him specifically because, like you mentioned, Will, he is a representation of decades of policies that just haven't worked because of bloated bureaucracies. On the one hand, you have this sort of church of woke on the left that offers you nothing but moral superiority and sanctimony, and this idea that your identity has to be predictive of your political platform, something that I learned over time and that I don't agree with. On the other hand, however, you have this sort of conservatism that sells you a set of political ideas that they don't necessarily appeal to your morality, but sometimes you have to sort of buy into one of their core products, like national security. So that was really the bulwark of Bush era conservatism, and their appeals to freedom and family values started to ring more and more hollow. But at the same time, when you have another wing, if you will, pushing back, it's inevitable that you're going to have people in the middle feel forgotten. That's why a lot of people don't give the man enough credit on this. But I think at the end of the day, part of the reason he won in 2016 is because he appealed to those voters in the Rust Belt, in these states that felt like they weren't being approached and they weren't being listened to. And when it came down to the things that really mattered, like welfare, Medicare, Social Security, and getting or reducing our involvement in other parts of the world. So being, I guess, more of an isolationist foreign policy, but repackaging it in America first, in a way that neither red nor blue would really approve of. So it gave them a chance to push forth that sort of this sort of new movement, if you will. That's why you see, at least in my opinion, and I think one of the reasons why you're starting to see a lot more pushback is this outsider movement, at least to me, seems like an explicit rejection of both the red collar conservatism on the right and of this sort of woke progressivism on the left. And I think voters are getting tired of having, vote this way or vote that way shoved down their throats every 5 seconds from celebrities. And that being said, one of the bad things, in spite of some of the good that comes with it, just from a cultural standpoint, sort of, I guess, transforming the cultural zeitgeist of the country, is, again, we go back to the fact that it's sort of spurned this this Pandora's box being the norm. I think, unfortunately, with having an outsider means that there can be that risk of not adhering to checks and balances and packing your offices and your posts, your cabinet, with people who aren't necessarily fit for the job, but those who might be most loyal to you. And I think we've seen that in certain instances. I think it's hard to argue that. So it's just one of those things where I think you just have to take the bitter with the better and evaluate what the results have been, which I guess we can get into in another question.
Yeah, like I think clearly things weren't great enough to keep a guy like Donald Trump, who's such a wild card. He's a reality show star, all of that kind of stuff. He wouldn't have won if things were as great as I think a lot of probably people on the Biden side are saying, you know, like during the Obama years, because Hillary was clearly the heir apparent. Maybe she wasn't as quote unquote likable in as far as people getting people to show up, but clearly there was something going on where people were not feeling that things were going well. And how much of that was perception, how much was reality, I don't know, but there was something to that. Mika, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think with regard to your question about like, well, I think I would just say that there was this moment in 2016 when I knew Trump was going to win, and it was in July. And I told my dad and like everyone, and I told everyone, and they all thought I was all thought I was crazy. I said Trump is going to win, and I called it in July. And I just saw like how many people were going to his rallies, and like this wave of that just like took over the world of like anti-establishment this, and it was all part of this anti-establishment wave of like, let's try something new. And so even though I didn't support Donald Trump in 2016, I was kind of excited to see what this would lead to, this anti-establishment candidate. Like, what's he going to do when he gets into office? And okay, so he questioned some like things here and there when it came to foreign policy, and I'll admit that. But you know, he talked about how he had bought out a lot of the politicians that, you know, or that people like him buy out a lot of the politicians that are in the Senate and in Congress and have even been presidents. But I didn't see any campaign finance reform. And he's talking about all these things that he wants to do better that are different. But at the end of the day, he governed like basically most of his presidency, he governed like a general Republican president. Like there was maybe a little bit of like, I'm going to question some foreign policy alliances here and there. I'm going to think outside the box. I'm going to pass criminal justice reform. Okay, I'll give him that. But at the end of the day, he you know, I was watching something the other day about why, like Ben Shapiro said that he's supporting Donald Trump, and he explained why. And I watched somebody analyze that and be like, Ben Shapiro didn't vote for Donald Trump in 2016 because he thought that he wasn't going to govern conservatively enough.
Right.
But for the people who voted for Donald Trump in 2016, they were hoping for a different version of Republican president that they didn't get.
Yeah, was that Sager on the Hill?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty good analysis. You know, I'm seeing when you say you were watching people be like fired up over Trump, I'm seeing more of that now. I see that people are more emboldened to say wear the Trump, you know, the MAGA hat, the Trump shirt. Yeah. There's less of a shame. I think in certain communities, I think into like the upper class, like intellectual kind of realm, like I think it's still like a very taboo thing. But I think that for them, it's interesting how people are more emboldened to not be, you know, as on the down low about their Trump support. I don't know what that's going to look like, you know, come, you know, November 3rd. But I feel like Trump appears that he's not an ideologue. You know, it doesn't seem like he has really strongly held beliefs. this is my analysis, and please correct me if you think that I'm wrong on this. He seems to be a bit narcissistic, and he's concerned with his image and legacy. I don't know if that rings true for you, but it seems to ring true for me, is that he's very self-absorbed about his legacy and about, him looking good. And then thinking that, kind of peeling that onion away, would it not be looking good for him if he's kind of concerned about his image? Wouldn't that mean that he should make the country successful? Doesn't that mean that he wants it to appear to be good? And how do you make something appear to be good? Well, it has to have some level of good in it. So is it an issue? What do you think about that? Is that even if it is for quote unquote the wrong reasons, whatever that might be, maybe it's just self-serving, but he is trying to make America the most prosperous country on the planet, continued prosperity, low unemployment, low minority unemployment, all of that kind of stuff. Because if America is successful, then if he going after this like it's one of his businesses, then he's successful because he did it. So what are your thoughts on that idea that he is kind of running this like a company? And as someone who understands small business and stuff like that, like when your business does well, then you do well, and that looks good, just like one of his casinos, crushing it. Is that, something that you see as a positive or a negative, I guess, would be my way to kind of wrap it up. Yeah, Demi? And then Skylar?
All right. So I feel that we all know, you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I got
it. I would say that we all know that Trump is a cocky guy, right? We all know that. But I think that if we could put that aside, he's a successful guy, whether he's a president or not, right? So the fact that he's living a stressful life right now for our country speaks volumes. And I feel it's important for people to be reminded of what he's doing for us. So yeah, he's gonna make himself look good because he wants to remind people of the changes that he's making or what he's trying to do for us, so that people don't forget. Because Trump is he is a legend. He's a hero. He's doing things that, like I said before, that no other president is really willing to do, and he's tearing down the cabal, and that's a big thing. And so, who wouldn't want to be the face of that, right? The media makes him feel bad, makes him look bad so often. It's important that he is able to hold himself accountable for what he's truly doing and to wake the world up. It's up to us to really tap in.
Yeah, Skylar, what are your thoughts on that idea that he's maybe not doing it for the quote unquote best reasons? He might not be the most kind individual or whatever it might be, but he is looking to have success. I'm sorry?
Is that my opinion on that is that we have to define exactly what does look good means. Because right now, I don't think anyone internationally or even within the Trump base would say that he looks good. He does not have the same regal, commanding presence as Obama does. He does not have the same sort of vocabulary as Obama does. Because when you put Trump next to Obama, they're about the same height, but there is something about the air around Obama that speak, oh, this guy is he looks good. He's model perfect. Obama, basically, right? But then, so when people say that, oh, Trump only cared that makes him look good, not once have I ever seen a flattering picture of President Trump, ever. You don't see things that are flattering about him. You don't see people commenting about how beautiful his family is. You see is mostly that people are commenting about the way he walks, the way he stands, the way he talks, the way he does this. He does not look good. He does not have that media presence. So we have to really, and now I'm doing it too. So we really have to define exactly what look good is. And I don't know, maybe the internet overlord may boot me off from talking about the Hunter Biden email things, because let's talk about looking good, about how the media makes something looks good, about how it does not look good. Because right now, the things that no one talk about is the Hunter Biden email, right? And imagine if this was Don Jump Jr., we will be hearing about it nonstop, 24/7. We will be having evidence like, oh, this is clearly evidence of Trump colluding with Russia. But here we are having definite proof, witnesses coming out testifying that yes, Hunter not only using the Biden name to have business with Russia, there is clear evidence that Biden, while in office, using his political leverage to drive some sort of like foreign, stuff with Ukraine. So does that look good? So when people say that Trump's come in, he's losing money by being a president, while Biden, for the past 47 something years, been in office, has gained wealth. So there's a net loss for President Trump as he's in office, as he continues to be in office, his own personal net worth. I'm not talking about his family net worth. I'm talking about his personal net worth. It goes down. For Biden, however, it goes up. So what looks good here? Are we talking about the physical appearance, or are we talking about like the optics of the media? Because then we can't really say that anyone looks good. It's only that the media make it so that, oh, he looks regal or he looks, commanding. But we never see that in the media. So you can't say that President Trump looks good or that he cares about how he looks. He cares about how he appeals to his voter. And I'm pretty sure 9 out of 10 Trump voter would say that, oh, he's not the greatest looking man. He's not the most eloquent man. He's not the most well-spoken man.
Yeah. So we're about 50 minutes in, and Kyle, I see your hand. But what I want to try and do is for the last 10 minutes or so is, I don't know how often, I don't know what your circles are like. I don't know how often that you sit down and talk to diverse people in all the ways that people can be diverse, and just have the conversation. What are you curious about from people who think differently than you? So I'm going to step back. You guys can unmute. I hope this is not just some sort of train wreck, some sort of mess, but just if someone has said something that you want to try and have a conversation with, see if you can just open this up. I just want to try and open this up for like 10 minutes without any kind of prompts, and just, leave this to you. This is an opportunity for all of you to engage with people. And if you're here, I have some sort of relationship with you one way or the other. Whether you follow me on social media, you know me personally, you know what my intentions are with all the stuff that I'm trying to do. And it's always about better understanding. It's always about learning. It's always about finding common ground and using kindness and empathy and grace and intellectual humility and genuine curiosity. So just want to hand that over. You can unmute, but just please, if you have anything going on in the background or anything like that, please just keep that down. Or if it's too loud, then maybe hit mute. But just gonna hand it over. Kyle, you had your hand up, but it can really go to anyone.
I'll go real quick and then it'll, but two things super fast. One, again, the optics of whether or not Donald Trump looks good depends on whose optics you're looking at, and that's every president ever. There are plenty of mass media markets who for a very long time were basically trying to say and trying to argue the opposite of saying, like, Donald Trump actually he has his own suit company. I mean, until I found out that one of my ties was a Donald Trump tie, I had a Donald Trump tie, and then I threw that shit away. But I did. I had one. and so, but in terms of Donald Trump's optics, in terms of whether or not he looks good or not, I mean, that just depends on whose show you're looking at, where you are on the internet, Bob, things of that nature. Because look, even in that, not the last debate, but 2 debates ago, the lady that they asked the question, first thing out of her mouth, Donald, you have such a wonderful smile. Like, I just love when you smile. So I think that just depends. Second thing, I wanted to go super fast back to the idea of the outsider. One thing that people really, really super duper forget, because we gave once we established the country, and from Declaration of Independence to signing of Constitution and developing the government, thusly started the portion of history where we started to slowly but surely turn into a career of politics. But prior to that, everybody was from where they were from, and they did whatever job they did, and they rode 3 or 4 or 5 days to Philadelphia, And so that meant some of the people who were the originators of this country were doctors. Some of them were blacksmiths. Some of them, Patrick Henry, I'm from Virginia. Patrick Henry was a hustler, straight up. He became a lawyer, but he didn't necessarily actually start on the path to law. He was poor. And so he met up with lawyers that were in the town, and he got the lawyers to mentor him into law school, right? And so the interesting thing is, one thing, again, to the good of Donald Trump, one thing that was good is we should be looking more at people who are our physicians, right? We should be looking at people who are local community leaders that work, I don't freaking know, are the general manager of the Target, right? Those types of people should be getting an easier chance at politics, which goes back to, I think, what Micah was talking about the fact that we haven't had that much change in campaign finance, right? So you can't even get to that point. And second, on top of that, it's very difficult to get to the point where you can start to take votes away without ranked choice voting, because if you don't have an opportunity to get on the ballot and even your name to actually matter in terms of a person's second or third choice, once there's runoffs, then you have essentially wasted $100,000 of your probably personal money or fundraised family money to, a losing cause where maybe you get, 5,000 votes and everybody likes you. So I think, that goes back to that point of more people who are not career politicians can very much be helped and added to the situation with appropriate campaign finance, so that it doesn't have to be somebody coming in with 20 mil fundraised 3 years ago for an election, that it takes you 3 years to fundraise to start that election. So just to say, I think we should have more outsiders, less career politicians have an opportunity, not necessarily win, but have an opportunity to actually be heard.
Can I ask Skylar a question? Or like anyone? This
Yeah, go
whole
ahead.
Biden scandal email situation. I just want to ask a clarifying question. Since Biden's released his tax returns, if from like the past however many years, if he received a large sum of money, wouldn't that show up on his tax returns?
No,
And
because
if
it's
it
not
doesn't,
through him. It's not through him,
but
it's through
if
his
it
family.
doesn't, then it's tax fraud. Like, is the
Okay,
issue?
so
I don't understand what the legal issue is here, because I just, from what I understand, there's when you have that kind of situation, there needs to be a quid pro quo. So Biden needed to, as vice president, give something to the Ukrainian government or whatever, this Ukrainian company, in exchange for money. That would be illegal. Or he received a large sum of money
it's
and
not
never
him who
reported
received
it,
the money.
which would be tax fraud. So those are the
No.
two possible
Yeah.
crimes that I can see, but I can't see a different one. I'm trying to
Okay, so
understand.
the thing is, the thing about politics and here's the irony of me being a capitalist, and then half of my dad's side of family is OG red communists. So how they works it, and how I've been observing how like career politicians been doing things so that numbers don't show up on official paper, is that they have someone else to front it for them. So the thing about Biden is that Hunter, if you read about it, he's on the board of director. He's on the board. He's being paid $80,000 a month or more in monies, in terms of profits, in terms of benefits, in terms of shares that are not necessarily taxable, that are not necessarily going to show up on paper, and none of that technically traced back to his dad. The only thing that Hunter Biden and Biden has is the Biden's name, right? And so even Hunter Biden himself, in some interviews like a few years back, and I can't look it up right now, but if I'm wrong, go ahead. I'll add my ad so you can just correct me later. Hunter himself admits that without the Biden last name, he would not be on the board of director for the Ukrainian oil and shale company. Now, what Biden did was not receiving money. What Biden did was basically a nudge, dinner, lunch with whoever's the board of director, with the top head government, is that, okay, either you fire this prosecutor guys who is looking into this company in which my son is on the board of, or I'm just gonna talk to the big guy, AKA Mr. Obama, to withdraw $1 billion funding to Ukraine. How they do business in the real world is not like what we see it. Okay, I've been to a Made of My Dad business meeting. You never see any paperwork ever. It's just a bunch of men sitting around talking. That's it. And then at the end of the day, when they're done talking, they'll shake hands and they'll go back to their office, or they'll tell the secretary, okay, so draft this up, send this over, have them sign it. That's how Hunter and Biden does their business. So the money say that my dad wants to have influence with someone, right? He can't receive the money, but I can. So the money, if traceable, will go back to me. It doesn't touch him. And if I want that money to not show up on the taxes, I just put it back into equity funds. So I don't have to pay taxes. That's why Jeff Bezos has a net worth of hundred something billions. But in reality, he doesn't actually have 100 something billions. His billions are what Amazon is worth, right? So you can't tax Bezos like $100 billion a year. His actual salary is like only 80K a year, but it's his worth in those company, in those corporations. That's where the money is. That's why you can't see it on taxes paper. That's why the big deal is that if this has been Don Trump Jr., we would hear about, oh, how obviously Trump is using his son to collude with Russia, or he's colluding with Russia through some long-winded meeting by going through Ukraine. Does that make sense?
And it didn't stick on Trump either, because for the same reason they.
Exactly. It can't stick. That's the point. That's how they do business here. I've met with ambassador, because my dad, again, is in the Communist Party. I've met with ambassador from Korea. I've met with how he do businesses with people from Singapore. You wouldn't know that these people are like career politicians. And it's really weird to sit down with the table and then like after the dinner, and then he said, oh, that was the ambassador from Korea. Or like, oh, that guy is the CEO of the biggest shipping company in Singapore. Because they don't talk about money. They don't talk like, oh, we're gonna give you 100 something million. They talk about like really vague value numbers. They talk about like the strategic area. They talk about how like the potential share. They never say anything in concrete number. They say everything in terms of potential, in terms of theoretical. And when that thing is down on paper, there's gonna be a buttload of cover-up paperwork for that.
Well, just to add a point, I've worked in American industry for 47 years, and from large steel companies to the second largest healthcare company, all they talk about are numbers. They have shareholders. Every dollar is accounted for. They have auditors. So I don't believe that what you're saying is true. I just, based on my life experience.
They do talk numbers. It's just their numbers are not in front of them. That's
the numbers, but anything that comes in, even it's all taxable. If somebody takes a bribe, they go. If you take a bribe, the bigger crime is not putting it on your taxes.
How do you tax Bitcoin? How do you tax equity values? How do you tax shares?
Is that what Hunter Biden was paid? Like, the thing I'm not getting is, did Joe Biden get money, or did he do something? Like,
Joe Biden got money through his son. His son is his wallet, essentially.
Hillary Clinton.
Like, if I were to say, if my dad can't directly take a bribe, obviously, you can't just go up to him and say, hey, I'm going to give you $80,000 to push this vote through Senate. They're going to go up to me and they're going to be like, hey, why don't you take this money in terms of shares? So it's technically, we're just giving you shares, so it's not on your tax return. You're not going to have to file any form of paperwork about it. But I do, in a way, have that money in terms of net worth. So Biden.
But that's not true, because our board members, the last company I was at, any board member is given stock. I mean, they want them to have a vested interest in the company. So they give them big blocks of stock. That's all reported as income.
Yeah.
If you're on the board of directors and I pay you a salary to be on there, which $80,000 isn't a whole lot a month. And I pay a month. It's not a lot a month to be on a board of directors. I don't know if you know what board of directors make, but you can make a living off of it. All right, but if I give you that $80,000 a month and I give you stock, not options, but actual stock, that's all the company has to report that as expenses out, and you have to report it as income. So,
Yeah,
I
but
mean, unless
it's not Joe Biden's income, it's Hunter Biden's.
So my
And
question.
well, that's also been disproved
That's the problem.
by
Like, I don't
our
think-
own intelligence agency that's not true. That's why they're not reporting on it, because they can't verify it. It comes from very shifty sources. So just so you know, I mean, you know, these are the different views that we have, is that the information that you're telling me, some of it doesn't make sense to me based on my experience. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to me. And I think that if enough people believe that it was true, it would have been reported. The only people that are reporting it are people on the right, because it's their October surprise. But even the sources are very sketchy. It can't be verified. So I don't know.
And the reasoning behind it seems to be like, you know, like in what I'm hearing from Skylar is it's that, well, you would do this to me, like you would say about me that I do this thing, so I'm going to say that about you. It's the back and forth about this particular issue, very much so, again, similar to, you know, what went down in Benghazi is what went down in Benghazi, right? But very similar to that activity of what they, you know, media created a term for it. There's an appropriate psychological term for it that I can't remember off the top of my head, but the whataboutism, right? Where if something occurs and you say, well, what about that person? Usually, again, these are tactics that people use in order to prevent you from looking at a reality that's right here. So you will talk about a thing that isn't true, that you are perceiving to potentially be true, to avoid you from looking at something that's in the other hand. In magic, that's sleight of hand, right? I need to keep you activated with your left eye so that you don't see what's happening behind your right eye. These are, again, that's the problem. And back to a point that Skylar, you mentioned earlier about you know, the differences between other countries and the United States of America. I completely agree with you with regard to the way we as Americans perceive pain, perceive suffering, we absolutely, look, you ain't gonna hear from no different from me. We are spoiled rotten, right? As Americans. But at the same time, if the argument is in other countries, there's still corporal punishment, and in other countries, you know, we're a little rougher and tougher and we don't necessarily talk, look in Iraq. Right. One of the hugest problems they're having with mental illness in Iraq is because there's so few mental health experts for anyone to talk to that they go to local.
I'd say it's more because they're in literal war.
Yes, absolutely. But
not about
again,
mental
the
health
reason,
experts.
but parts of the reasons why there's so much mental illness is because there's no resources allocated to aid the people in the fact that they are living actively in a war zone. So if you grow up with corporal punishment, you are going to learn a certain way to process emotion, and you're going to learn a certain way to process trauma. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's still healthy or not. It doesn't necessarily mean that. And if you're in a communist country, right, you're going to grow up with the ideals of that communist country in your mind. And when you go somewhere else, you're going to perceive the world differently in the same way that I would perceive the world differently coming from where I'm from when I go to a communist country. I think it's very difficult to try and say that just because another place is rougher or has less is less soft, that changes the difficulties that America has with abusive behaviors and con men like tactics with regard to how we communicate with each other. That is very much whataboutism. Just because that's how it operates there doesn't mean that's how it should operate here. So I think that's just it's a very challenging thing when we try to talk about how things are done in other places, when the cultural norms here are what these things are, and those cultural norms wouldn't align no matter what. They wouldn't align in the. So I've spoken enough. I'll give the floor to other people.
What I want to say
Yeah, Demi, real quick, and then I want to try and wrap it up in a way that kind of puts a bow on it.
Okay, so two things. So Biden's been, in politics for over 30 years. I would love a list of 5 things that he's done for us with his help. So my question is, what will he do as president that he did for us as vice president, right? So that's my major concern. And why are these people being censored? Like on Twitter, what's the point of that? What is it, because they don't want the truth to come out? Like, why is it when things come out, they get silenced? And we have to look at who's silencing us, or these people who are being silenced. It's the far left.
Yeah, I think that there's, thank you, Demi. Yeah, I think that there is a place where we find common ground here, which is Hunter Biden corrupt? Probably. Okay. Was the laptop information taken either from the cloud, and then they said it was taken from some random store? Yeah, it was probably obtained illegally. The New York Times getting the stuff on Trump's taxes, was that obtained illegally? Yeah. So this is the game that is played. And going back to what Demi said about, when the New York Post released that, and then there was a massive cover up on social media by Facebook and Twitter, there is a clear bias that big tech companies have against Trump. Yes. But this is just the situation that we're in. I think all of us, no matter where you fall on Donald Trump as the person, whether or not he's going to be the best for us, I think we all agree that the system that we are in right now, Trump and beyond, and the Trump pushback is not good, because there isn't a lot of clear understanding about what is true, what is not. What is essentially what I was trying to do here, which is the best, most honest arguments from each side about why we think what we think. And the way social media works, we're all in our echo chambers and stuff like that. I don't know. This went really quickly. Never done a podcast with more than one person before. I'm probably better with one-on-one, but I appreciate you guys being here. I don't know if this is something that changed your mind or gave you new perspectives, as much as maybe we could if we spent the weekend together. But I do want to just offer to the people listening, this will be released on my podcast and also through Scriber News, is just the respect that you had for one another, I think, is just a great place to start. I want to just say, if anyone is interested in continuing these conversations, the beautiful thing about social media, the reason I expanded my classroom to social media, is to say, hey, if I have any bad ideas or wrong ideas, or if you have any pushback, please reach out to me and let's engage. And I know that's not always easy to do on social media, but it's possible. And I've done it with all of you to some degree or another. So if you are interested in continuing these conversations with people who are listening to this, I just want to put that out there, that your social media will be available to everyone. I appreciate you all being here. I thought that you were able to articulate your points, but again, not as much as you probably would have liked, as much as I would have liked for all of you. But I wanted to make sure that I hit a little bit, and time kind of flies. But I appreciate you all for giving me your time. I know how valuable time is for everyone, and for you to go along with me on this journey to try and bridge some of these gaps in our country, I think is really important. And I appreciate you all truly for doing it.
Thanks for hosting. Really,
thank you so much.
Really interesting.
All right, guys. Yeah. All right. Take care.
Yeah.
Night. Thanks, everyone.
Nice
this
to meet
has been
everybody.
great.
Stay safe out here.
Likewise. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.